Good morning, I'm Ramo, and this is the Daily Signal for November 14th, 2025. We're starting with breaking news that's sending shockwaves across the globe right now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy is facing the biggest crisis of his presidency as a massive corruption scandal involving his former business partner has exploded overnight. We're talking about $100 million allegedly stolen from Ukraine's nuclear sector while the country fights for its survival. This is developing rapidly, and here's what we know so far.
Unfiltered. Now.
That's just the beginning. Here are 9 more critical sources breaking today that you absolutely need to know about. Scientists claim they've sequenced Adolf Hitler's DNA, sparking an international ethical firestorm and outrage from Holocaust survivors who are calling this research morally repugnant. Urgent. Israeli settlers torched a West Bank mosque overnight during Friday prayers, with worshippers narrowly escaping as violence surges across the region. Developing. China has mysteriously closed airspace over Inner Mongolia amid reports of a Shenzhou spacecraft emergency landing after a debris impact scare. Crisis. The U.S. State Department has issued a rare warning to Americans in Japan: beware of bear attacks, after 12 people were injured and a child was killed in just 1 week. Urgent. Iraq's government faces total collapse as the prime minister struggles to form a coalition, threatening to return the country to chaos and violence. Breaking. Paris marks 10 years since the Bataclan massacre, with survivors still traumatized and security on high alert for new terrorist threats. Developing. Israel has identified another deceased hostage returned by Hamas, with families claiming torture before death as the crisis escalates. Viral crisis. Germany's new humanoid robot collapsed seconds into its debut, becoming a global meme and raising questions about the country's AI investments. Urgent. Japan's prime minister is reportedly sleeping only 2 hours a night, sparking fears about his health and the nation's extreme overwork culture. These stories are developing fast. Let's get the critical details you need to know right now. This is a crisis that could change everything for Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelenskiy is scrambling to contain a corruption scandal that's threatening his government's credibility at the worst possible time, while fighting a war with Russia. Here's what authorities aren't telling you. Timur Mindich, Zelenskyy's former business partner and co-owner of the production company that made Zelenskiy famous, allegedly ran a criminal network that siphoned $100 million from Ukraine's nuclear energy sector. We're talking about forcing subcontractors to pay massive bribes while Ukraine desperately needed every penny for its defense. The most shocking part? Mindich fled the country just hours before raids began, almost like he knew what was coming. This has sparked conspiracy theories that someone tipped him off from the highest levels of government. Zelenskiy has been forced to personally disavow 2 top ministers, but critics are asking the devastating question: how could the president not know about his former partner's alleged crimes? Remember, Zelenskiy once tried to dismantle Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies, and now it looks like those same agencies are the ones exposing this scandal. This could mean the end of Western support at Ukraine's most critical hour. The implications are staggering, but that's not the only crisis shaking the world today. Scientists are claiming they've done the unthinkable, verified and sequenced Adolf Hitler's DNA using remains from his bunker in Berlin. This revelation has ignited an international firestorm that's exposing the darkest ethical questions about science and history. The DNA was extracted from skull fragments and teeth recovered in 1945, with genetic markers allegedly matching historical records. But here's what's terrifying Holocaust survivors and Jewish groups worldwide. They're calling this research morally repugnant and warning it could fuel neo-Nazi myths about racial superiority. Critics are asking the devastating question: what if this genetic information falls into the wrong hands? Could it be misused for modern racial science or become a twisted shrine for extremists? Some researchers are defending the study, saying it could finally put conspiracy theories to rest, but others warn we're opening Pandora's box. The timing couldn't be worse. With anti-Semitism rising globally and Holocaust denial still spreading online, this scientific revelation is becoming a political weapon. Survivors who lived through the horrors of Nazi Germany are watching their worst fears come true as Hitler's legacy continues to haunt us even through his DNA. This is far more than just a scientific discovery, it's a moral crisis that's dividing the world. Meanwhile, another religious site has become the target of violence. A sacred mosque in the West Bank was set ablaze overnight in one of the most brazen attacks on Palestinian religious sites we've seen in years. Israeli settlers torched the building during Friday prayers, with worshippers barely escaping with their lives as flames consumed their place of worship. The attackers left graffiti reading "Revenge" at the scene, and this is happening amid a surge in settler violence that has exploded in the past week alone. We're talking about over a dozen attacks on Palestinian villages, with families terrorized in their own homes. Here's what makes this even more devastating. The mosque was more than just a building. It was the spiritual heart of a community that's already been traumatized by decades of conflict. Now they're watching their sacred space reduced to ashes while the world watches. The Israeli government has condemned the attack, but Palestinians are asking the brutal question: why can't they stop these extremist settlers? Families are living in fear, children are afraid to go to school, and entire communities are under siege. This attack has deepened trauma that may never heal, and it's risking an explosion of violence that could engulf the entire region. The situation is deteriorating by the hour, and there's no end in sight to this nightmare. Adding to today's international chaos, China is hiding something big. China has suddenly closed airspace over Inner Mongolia, and authorities won't say why, but all signs point to an emergency. Shenzhou spacecraft landing that could mean life or death for Chinese astronauts. This unscheduled closure follows reports of a debris impact scare from a malfunctioning satellite, with damage reported in rural areas. The Shenzhou capsule may be returning early due to safety concerns, and families of the astronauts are on edge as the world watches for updates. But here's what's terrifying. China's space program has a history of secrecy, and they're not confirming the reason for the closure. Are the astronauts in immediate danger? Is this part of a larger space debris crisis? We simply don't know, and that silence is fueling speculation about a massive cover-up. This could be a turning point for China's space ambitions if something goes wrong. The stakes couldn't be higher. Speaking of unusual warnings, Americans in Japan are facing a deadly threat. The U.S. State Department has issued something we've never seen before, a warning to Americans in Japan to avoid hiking because of a surge in bear attacks that has turned deadly. 12 people have been injured in just 1 week, including a fatal attack on a child that has shocked the nation. Climate change and food shortages are driving bears into populated areas where they've never been seen before. Schools are closing, outdoor activities are canceled, and tourists are terrified to leave their hotels. This isn't just an animal problem, it's a climate crisis manifesting in the most frightening way possible. Japanese officials are under enormous pressure to cull bear populations, but animal rights protests are complicating the response, while more people get hurt every day. Families are asking the desperate question: how do we protect our children when nature itself has become the threat? This unprecedented warning means authorities believe the danger is real and immediate. No one knows when it will end. In Iraq, political chaos threatens to spiral into violence. Iraq's prime minister won the most seats in parliamentary elections, but the country is facing a government formation crisis that could plunge it back into chaos and violence. Pro-Iran factions and Sunni blocs are refusing to cooperate, creating a deadlock that threatens everything. Without a functioning government, Iraq risks economic collapse just when it can least afford it. Allegations of vote rigging have sparked protests in Baghdad, and millions of Iraqis who thought they'd finally found stability are now facing their worst nightmare: a return to the violence and instability that tore their country apart for decades. This political paralysis means no budget, no policies, and no solutions for a population that's already suffered too much. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, and regional powers are positioning themselves to fill the vacuum. Iraq stands on the brink once again. Paris is marking 10 years since the Bataclan massacre, with survivors still struggling with trauma and security on high alert. The scars of that night of terror remain raw, with families demanding justice and better protection from new threats that continue to emerge. Israel has identified Manny Godard as the latest deceased hostage returned by Hamas, with families alleging torture before death. This grim ritual continues as more hostages remain in captivity, and the diplomatic crisis escalates with no resolution in sight. A new humanoid robot collapsed seconds into its debut as the Rocky theme played, becoming a global meme that's raising serious questions about the country's massive AI investments and technological capabilities on the world stage. Japan's prime minister is reportedly sleeping only 2 hours per night, sparking fears about his health and reigniting the national debate about the country's deadly overwork culture that continues to claim lives. What we're seeing today isn't just a collection of random news events. This is all part of a bigger picture that reveals how our world is fracturing under unprecedented pressure. From Zelenskyy's corruption scandal threatening Ukraine's war effort, to religious violence in the West Bank, to China's space secrecy, to bear attacks driven by climate change, we're witnessing the breakdown of the systems and institutions that once provided stability and safety. The corruption in Ukraine shows how even heroes can fall when power and money intersect. The mosque burning demonstrates how religious hatred continues to tear communities apart. The space emergency reveals how dangerous secrecy can be in our interconnected world. And the bear attacks prove that climate change isn't a future threat. It's killing people right now. These aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a world under stress, where traditional solutions aren't working and new crises emerge faster than we can solve them. Whether it's political corruption, religious violence, technological failures, or environmental collapse, the common thread is clear. The institutions we depend on are being tested like never before. The question isn't whether more crises will emerge, it's whether we're prepared for what comes next. These developing situations will shape not just the headlines, but the world our children inherit. Closing, 30 seconds. That's the Daily Signal for November 14th, 2025. We'll continue monitoring these developing situations throughout the day as they unfold. The world is changing rapidly, and these stories matter because they affect all of us. Stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, in a world of crisis, knowledge is your greatest protection. Subscribe for tomorrow's breaking coverage, share this with someone who needs to know, and let us know what stories matter most to you. I'm Remo, and we'll see you tomorrow with the news that shapes your world. Until then, stay safe out there.
Unfiltered. Now.